As long as you get her to sing a song.
Even find the Sedgman songbook. That's where most of the songs are that I know. Put on the poppy seeds.
Well,
like
I know you don't like raisins in your challah.
That's what I like best.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, my earliest years, I lived with my Aunt Han. We lived with Aunt Han and Uncle Liz Shapiro, and my Aunt Han, I don't really. Well, I remember certain things, but this was during the Depression, and the one food I remember most was chicken fricassee, which was made with chicken legs and chicken necks and I don't know, all that stuff made into sort of like a stew, I guess. Oh, I remember we had, I wonder if you have that in your particular cuisine. We had what we called, it was stuffed kishka, which is you would take the gut and stuff it. And
pig nut?
It probably wouldn't be a pig.
no, it would not be a pig.
Oh.
But it was the same kind of thing, and it was called, somehow the name Helzel sticks with me, but it was stuffed kishka is what it was. Well, it was the case with some kind of meal, it seems, and seasoned. It was good, at least as I recall it. Oh, and we had chopped liver. That we always had. And
What about gefilte fish?
yeah, we had gefilte fish. I don't remember. I guess Aunt Han made gefilte fish. I remember my grandma used to make she would come to our house to visit once a week, and she would bring her own fish, and because she kept a very kosher home, and even though my mother kept a kosher home, it wasn't good enough for my grandma, so she brought her own. She would cook her own, very good, as I recall it now, but it was a fish stew with milk and stuff like that. In fact, my grandma had, my mother's mother had 7 children. And as a child, I used to think that she had 7 children so she would have a place to go every day in the week. And she used to come to our house once a week. And she used to travel on the L, to get around. And she lived with my mother's oldest sister, my Aunt Bessie. But she came to us once a week, and then she went around to visit the other children. At least that's the way I remember it.
And so did all the siblings live in the same general area?
No. Libby and Fan lived relatively close to us. Han lived in Rockaway. This is when we moved to Brooklyn, which was when I was 7 years old. And so I used to go to Aunt Fan's a lot because her daughter Shirley was about my age, and Fan used to help take care of us while my mother was working. In fact, my Aunt Han and my Aunt Fan both made it possible for my mother to go to work. There were no such things as, I never thought of her as a single mother, which is what she was, and she had to go to work. She was a teacher, and she used to both go to work, and she was also studying to get her bachelor's degree at City College, and she would go to school at night to get her bachelor's degree, because when she went to school, she went to a 2-year teacher's training program. This was before she was married. And then she wasn't working until my father died, and then she went back to teaching. And so Aunt Han, for those 6 years that we lived with her, took care of me and Janet. And she had two sons, Mosey and Sander. Jessica was born after we moved. Um, and, um, and then when we moved to Brooklyn, it was my Aunt Fan who really helped most with the child care. By this time, Janet was in high school and she didn't need a babysitter, so to speak.
Did your mother teach before she got married and then she stopped?
I don't know whether she actually taught or not. But I know that she did go, well, she talked about going back to teaching, so it's quite possible that she taught, but I know that she had a degree to teach before she got married.
And what did she teach when she was teaching?
This was elementary school. And then before we moved to Brooklyn, she must have been studying to take the assistant principal's exam, because we moved to Brooklyn when she became an assistant principal. And of course, I thought that was great. We moved into it was a tiny apartment, and after a while it turned out that we spent most of our weekends, it seemed to me, and all of the Jewish holidays we spent in Rockaway, because that's where we went to the temple there, the synagogue there. And but you know, Aunt Han's house, everybody went to Aunt Han's house somehow. The other thing I remember eating at Aunt Han's house was that on Sundays we had cold fried fish. That was not particularly not that I remember it as a Jewish dish or anything like that, but that was one of the things. And when we were living in Rockaway, for a long time, apparently, everybody used to go out for the summer to visit. And there was a saying in the family, that's right, saying in the family, if you don't come to visit us in the winter, you can't come in the summer. But Aunt Han could never say no to anybody, so the place was filled. And at some point early on, she and my mother must have decided it was time for them to rent the house for the summer, which they did. And that's when we went up to Matamoros, which was this, you've seen a few of the pictures of all of the kids at Matamoros. And
It was a farm?
it was a place called Bell's Farm, and which was right across the river from Tri-State Rock, which I think you went to visit, but at that point it was underneath the bridge of the highway.
Yeah, I-84 is now.
What's that?
I-84, the interstate.
Is that what it is that goes? Yeah, right over the whole, and right over the rock and over the property that had been the farm. But we went up there for many summers and loved it. Dozens of kids, it seemed to me. And the one person who really loved it especially was Roy. He became very good friends of the farmer,
Really?
whose name was Frank McDonald. And so we went up there. And from there, at one point, they were out driving, and were driving up 209 out of Port Jervis and discovered this sign which said, you know, Jewish camp or something. That's how they found Sedgwick. Yeah. And my mother and Janet went to camp. Their first year was 1928. So they were there for 2 summers before I was old enough to go. So I didn't go until 1930 when I was 7 years old.
So did you stay with Aunt Han? Like,
Stayed with Aunt Han and all the other.
And when did Aunt Han start going? Because she was
She
Grand
probably,
Mother.
yeah, she must have come, I don't know.
shortly after. Well, no, 'cause
I
she had
think
Jessica.
Jessica was an infant.
Right.
Jessica was born, I think, in 1930 or 31.
Uh-huh.
And I guess when it was old, when she
She
could
was
bring
older.
Jessica. And in those days, that was when they finally had the Yonim camp
Right.
for the 5 and 6 year olds. and that's probably when she
Yeah.
came. So it was in the mid-30s, which is when Dad went. His first summer, I think, was 35. And
You know how it was that Grandpa's family found Sedgwick?
I have a feeling it was through his father, Lou, who, in fact, I was interested to note that they never mentioned the Jewish Welfare Board or
In the Benderly?
in the Benderly books, and never mentioned Grandpa Lou. And I'm sure that he knew most of those people because he was, I remember Dad knew the names, and I'm sure it was, through something like that, through knowing schoolmen. He was, he was within the Jewish educational field anyway, so he certainly would have learned about the camp that way.
Did you ever visit your father at his workplace?
No, I was an infant when he died. I was less than 2 years
Less than
old.
2? Oh, I
Yeah.
thought it was supposed to be 5.
No. And I don't think Janet ever did either. At least I never heard her mention that she did. We did find those old photographs of his laboratory. Have you seen those?
I have, yeah.
But
He was a food chemist, right?
yeah, worked for General Mills, I think is what it was.
Did he study chemistry in college?
I guess so. And he, I think that General Mills facility may have been someplace in Brooklyn, right near where
Oh, is that right?
where you were living. Yeah. I suppose we could find that out, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
How
But
long did you stay in the house after your father passed away for any period of time?
no, apparently Ann Han and her family and my parents both bought houses in Rockaway at the same time and moved there. But Ann Han had this house up in the Ponset at 144th Street. My parents had a big house on right on the boulevard in 120th Street, something like that.
I knew that.
Yeah. And I have some of the pictures, some of the really old pictures of Janet's 5th birthday when I was an infant
Right, and there's
were
a picture.
taken on the porch
Porch.
of that house.
Oh.
And I assume that the only thing I was ever told was that, we moved in with Ann Han after my father died. So,
So you weren't on the beach then, that house was.
none of the houses were
Well, I
right
mean-
on the beach. Well, it was
Ann Han's
closer.
Was a couple of blocks from the beach.
Yeah, and this was 1 block from the beach.
Oh, okay.
The boulevard
Was
was
that close?
was that close to the beach. There was a small Jewish community, but it was a very close-knit community. There were 2 synagogues, actually. There was an Orthodox synagogue, and then there was Temple Bethel, which is the one that my parents and Ann Han and her and Uncle Liz helped to form, actually. And the building at 100 and I think it's 121st Street, which is the main building now, was built then. So my mother lived just a couple of blocks from, we lived just a couple of blocks from where that was. But I think she must have sold the house right away and moved in with Ann Han.
And was Rabbi Gordis the
No,
rabbi then?
I forget the guy's name, but no, somehow the name Goldstein. But he came, I don't know, sometime in the mid-30s, I think.
Gordis.
Gordis. Yeah. And I think one of his sons is up at Hopkins.
Yes, that's right.
in the hospital, I
Right.
think. And then there's is Hadassah Gordis, is that? I
That
can-
sounds familiar too. Would that be
I wouldn't know,
the
but there's
daughter-in-law?
another son,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
No, he had just 3 sons, and, but that was shortly after, I,
Where did your parents meet?
they probably met in Williamsburg, near where they lived. And you had been to, at least, well, you knew where
I'm gonna,
where the Whiteses lived,
Right.
and then where the Saltpeters lived was apparently under the what is now right
Yeah,
in the area
Brooklyn
Brooklyn
Queens
Queens Expressway.
And the other one was a storefront, which when I visited it had been closed for a long time. So I don't think it was the
No.
same building.
No, I
They were
don't.
not all that far apart, maybe a mile apart.
Yeah, but it was within, that was a big Jewish community, Williamsburg was, apparently. And it was a middle-class community. I mean, they had houses, I guess they were these old brownstone houses. And the only house I remember visiting there was the Saltpeters. And I remember because my Uncle Charlie, there were 4 brothers. My father was one of 4 brothers, and Charlie was the youngest. And he was the one who never married, so he was living with his parents. And he had a ukulele and a straw hat, a boater. And he was a real Joe College kind of guy. So I remembered visiting there. And I assume that by the time I was old enough to remember anything, my grandfather had died the year, my Whiteser had died the year I was born. So my grandmother probably sold the house and moved in with Bessie, whenever that was. I don't know. I mean, so far as I knew, she always lived in Brooklyn, in Ozone Park. Was that Brooklyn or Queens?
Those are
Queens, yeah. With Bessie. Yeah.
So those houses in Williamsburg, where your parents grew up, was that the first places they lived in the United States?
That I don't know. It's possible. They were both born in this country. But my mother was of the 7 children, she was the 3rd oldest, and she was the first to be born in this country. Bessie was born in England, where the family had migrated on their way from Lithuania, probably, and stopped there long enough so that Bessie was born there, and there was a cousin whom I remember who spoke with a heavy British accent, whom I assume it was a mixture of heavy British accent with some Yiddish combined, which was really very funny in my ears. And then Bessie, right?
yeah, I have to interrupt for a second. I think it's time for the turkey to come out, but I
Oh,
thought we
okay.
should take its temperature.
Well, it was very primitive, first of all. And by primitive, I mean that we had outdoor privies, and we had wash rooms that were great big trough with water. You turned on the water, and we used to have what we called spritz baths. We used to sit up there and just shower each other.
Was it hot and cold water?
No, it's all cold. And we lived in these wooden bunks with great big flaps, and we had mosquito nettings, because they were, they certainly weren't screened. And
So the sides had or just the?
Just the sides.
Yeah.
The tent.
No, they weren't. Well, the older kids had tents, but the younger ones had regular, the old wooden bunks. I think that those were still there when you were there. Oh yeah, we have. I mean, that we had routines. We got up in the morning, and the first thing we did was have calisthenics. Everybody up for cal, and then we got dressed and we had to go to services. We had services every morning.
How
And
long do they last?
15 minutes.
Led by a male or female?
No, I don't know who led them. And it must have been females. It was a very progressive camp.
That's when you had your bat mitzvahs.
That's right. That's right. And, the book describes, the experiential kind of thing where the religious stuff and the Zionist stuff is all built into everything else that you do. So
We weren't doing any farming or anything.
no. At one time, apparently, according to the book, they opened with a farm.
Really?
Yeah, they were doing some farming to help support the camp. I don't know. That I never heard of. But the place where we really learned stuff was with the songs. I mean, that was, that's why I said, did you find the Sedgwick songster?
Were these written by counselors or were these traditional songs?
Well, some of them were traditional songs, some of them were spiritual, some of them were folk songs. And then there were the camp songs. In fact, there was something in the book about that when Sedgwick was a summer camp for the Central Jewish Institute in New York, and the name, which was changed in it was called the CJI camps, and the name was changed somewhere in the early 30s into Sedgwick, which is a combination of CJI, but it sounded, first of all, it sounded Indian, so it was more, and it was easy, and Schoolman said it was easier for them to write songs with that.
Sedgwick and CJI.
Well, for the most part, we only saw them on Shabbat, and the oldest group, the Deborahs and the Herzls, we had socials. I don't know how often. But we didn't have activities together. And we saw we also saw the boys because we went boating in the boys' lake.
Now, did you guys meet when you were CITs? Or
Yeah.
counselors?
Yeah. Well, the CTs would get together on a regular basis, I suppose. I mean, we got together, the boys and the girls got together more than
More in the camp.
the campers.
Would you leave the camp together or would you always stay at the camp?
No, we never left the camp together, I don't think. Aunt Bobby was in my bunk when I was a CT.
But that's not how you met, Dad.
No, but that may have been why he was over in the girls' camp visiting on visiting day. I don't know. I couldn't prove that.
Do you remember the first time you met Grandpa?
No. No, I think that I knew about him, probably saw him the year before, and somehow I had my eye on him.
After seeing him voting, maybe?
Apparently you had your eye on several boys at camp.
Oh boy.
That might be Jude.
Yeah, that's Jude. Hello. Hi, Louie. How are you? We're doing fine. Yeah, that's what I hear. So whom did you speak to? That's right. That's right. And they're doing all of the cooking, and I've been doing nothing. I haven't even been giving many orders. In fact, I've been controlling myself pretty well. At the moment, Sam has a camera turned on me, so I don't know what that means. But Sam is here, and Devin is here, and Alex and Kristen will be coming later. We were just deciding that it was really very nice because it was much easier. Didn't have to move a lot of furniture around and stuff like that. They still have to open the table and set the table and all that kind of stuff. That's right, yeah. So how are you? Oh. On what? What does that mean? Oh, that's interesting.